Pretty much every short film that I've written music for has had one thing in common, and that is that I produce the music using orchestral sample libraries, often at great personal expense. I mean, these things are really expensive. But there used to be a time when computers simply didn't have the processing power or memory bandwidth to be able to reliably play back a surgically sampled orchestra. My first keyboard, and in fact my first brush at music production, was my dad's old Yamaha DX7. Sounds on it were pretty lackluster, but even in the 80s, people were thinking about how can we fit a orchestral strings patch onto this keyboard. This thing has been around for a long time, and for a long time that kind of was the way that media composers would work. You would have a big keyboard workstation with some synthesizer sounds that sound vaguely like an orchestra, but kind of not really. And so that takes us to today. Even though synthesizer sound modeling hasn't really taken off in the same way that sample library recording has, there are still a lot of companies that try to make it work. And the benefits are obvious. A synthesizer requires a lot less stored space, memory bandwidth. There are a lot of advantages to not having 50 gigabytes of violins on your hard drive. So this brings us to Analog Orchestra by Mintona Audio. They've basically developed an orchestral-esque sound bank for Vital, which is a free synthesizer, and the whole sound bank only costs $25, or $12 if you get it before October. So can a $25 orchestral sound bank replace a full-on surgically recorded orchestral sample library? The answer is pretty complicated. My favourite part of the sound bank is this full strings patch. It's so rich and cinematic and filmic straight out of the box. Now it does not include individual violin viola sections, so your options for real orchestration are pretty slim, but even still, the sound of just putting a few chords on this is absolutely perfect for film composition. You do get a high strings patch and a low strings patch as well. I think these are both pretty useful. The high strings is kind of brighter than the full strings patch, and the low strings patch is pretty unique. It's not really the same kind of sordino sound that you get with the full strings or the high strings. It's more of kind of this weird tremolo sound. So while it doesn't sound very realistic at all, it does sound really evocative and emotional, I guess. Have a listen. You do also get some string spiccato sounds. I don't think they're very convincing. When I think of a spiccato sound, I want something really quick and short, something that'll work for epic music, and this doesn't really quite hit the mark for that for me. The notes are just a bit too long. Of course, there's more than just string sounds. There's quite a number of different percussion sounds. The only thing that kind of annoys me is that for each percussion patch, you only get one sound, no matter where you hit on the keyboard. So I found that to be a bit limiting, but the sounds themselves are really good. I just wish there were more of them, basically. Of course, you also get woodwinds and brass sounds. Compared to the strings and percussion, I felt a bit less enthusiastic about these. They kind of have a bit more of an artificial quality about them. If I was listening to especially the woodwinds, the clarinet and the oboes or the flutes, listening to them you would know that it's kind of a synthesizer and it's not really an authentic instrument. That said, I think there is still probably a use case for them, especially if you're layering it with other instruments, but on their own they kind of stick out as a sore thumb a little bit for me. There is a pretty great selection of very evocative filmic sounds in this sound bank. It does not have the breadth or the realism of a fully sampled sample library, but depending on your use case, this might not be a big issue. Like, I could definitely see myself using this as a very simple, like, okay, I need chords for this film sequence and I need them right now. And it does have a really unique sound in terms of bridging that gap between the analog string sound and like the digital synthesizer realm. It is really somewhere in the middle, which leads for a very unique sound, in my opinion. Of course, because it is a synthesizer, fundamentally you miss out on a lot of the big ticket features that you would get in a more expensive sample library. Things like having a lot of velocity layers, you know, true legato or round robins. I don't really know if that's possible within the confines of a synthesizer, but they are absent from the sound bank. Having said that, I think it is well worth the cheap price of entry, considering how unique and filmic all of these sounds are. It doesn't really hold up to like a $400 orchestral sample library, but I do think it compares very favorably to a lot of the kind of beginner orchestral sample libraries, things like the free BBC SO Discover. I think that is easily on par with that package and probably has some slightly more unique sounds to boot. So yeah, if that sounds interesting, you know, maybe give it a go, and until then, I will see you later.